Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Reclaim Network Plus webinar series. So this is webinar number 13. As you may know, the Reclaim is a Network Plus, which is funded through the UKRI from three councils, which is the EPSRC, NERC, and AHRC. And there are 5 partners who are involved in there. So that's led by University of Surrey with UKCH, Warwick, Bath, and Bangor University. So this is the team of the investigators. So my name is Prashant Kumar, and I'm professor and chair in air quality and health at the University of Surrey. And these are my co-investigators. They come from our partner universities, and they all are kind of representing a the multidisciplinary area of research. The network is supported by our network manager, Mark Simmons, and we got lead in Charlotte, and a network fellow, Dr. Cece Dabele. We got at the moment over nearly 500 members, and this member base is growing, and they come from almost around 50 countries. So the whole idea of this webinar series is to bring or to share the best practices and facilitate the knowledge exchange between the practitioners, researchers, policymakers, businesses, or individuals, interested in implementing the green or blue infrastructure for making the city sustainable and healthy and livable. Usually the seminars happens every Wednesday, in month, in the first week of Wednesday. That's between 12:30 to 13:30. We got 2 speakers, and they come from a very diverse background. So you might see the people coming from academic and non-academic backgrounds, and ECRs, and very established researchers, to try to bring the diversity and offer an opportunity to the people. The last one was very interesting one that was done by the 2 of the colleagues looking into the green walls and looking into the sustainability of the cities from the greening perspective. So the invitation is open. So if you are interested to be any speaker, please send an email on info@reclaim-network.org, or there is also an online form. If you go onto the Reclaim Network page, you can just fill a form, and then we can contact you. So we'll be very willing to share your important work in this area with the Reclaim Network community. So today, we got 2 fantastic presentations. We got Dr. Andrea Berardi. He is the co-director from the Corber Collective, and Gillian Dick. She is coming from the Glasgow City Council, and there are fantastic presentations you will hear. So before I start, just a few housekeeping notes. So these webinars are recorded. So you could see those webinars on the YouTube. So there are past webinars as well, which you may be able to have a look, and you can see the link being posted in the chat box. We have these speakers, and each of them will be speaking for around 20 minutes. We will not take the questions after the first talk, so we will take rather all the questions after the second talk. What I'll request you to is use the Q&A box on your screen and write your questions there. You can add your name and the affiliation if you want that to be read with your question. And the question and answer session will be chaired by my colleague, Dr. Nerea Calvillo. She is the co-investigator from the University of Warwick on the Reclaim Network. So she will read your questions to the speakers, and we will have that the question session done. So without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Andrea Berardi, who has successfully spearheaded the inclusion of green corridor policy with neighborhood planning through a community-led participatory process. He is one of our secondees who took a secondment through the Reclaim Network, and he worked with the Spelthorne Borough Council to scale up his participatory green infrastructure, which we call it GBGI, co-design approach at borough level, in order to engage with the needs and desires of local stakeholders, especially low-income and vulnerable communities. In this seminar, Andrea will present his GBGI participatory and systematic co-design approach, and will showcase videos produced by community members of the co-design process. Very exciting presentation. So over to you, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Prashant, for the introduction, and it's a great pleasure to be here at this webinar presenting the great work that I've been doing with communities. So let me share my screen. Oops, actually, let me stop sharing and share the right screen. I've got two screens and practiced it before, and so here we go. Let me get the right screen this time. Yes, and okay, good. So can everybody see my presentation? Should be coming up anytime now. There is a little bit of a short delay. There you go. It should be up and running there. So my talk today is about participatory design with marginalized communities. A little bit about my background. I am a senior lecturer in environmental information systems at the Open University. When I turned 52 years ago, I actually decided to go part-time. So I only work on average about a day a week at the Open University as an academic, because I wanted actually to do more with my time in terms of impact within communities. So I was also elected as a councillor within Runnymede Borough Council. So I'm very interested in policy making, and I'm driving policy with regards to GBI, sustainability, climate change within Runnymede Borough Council. But I'm also a co-director of a community interest company called the Cobra Collective that's focused on community empowerment. And this secondment was through the Cobra Collective. Actually, being the co-director of your own CIC makes life so much easier. You don't have to have university approvals for anything. You just go ahead and do it. So it was very easy to initiate. So a little bit about my history with GBGI, policymaking and community participation. I was part of and led a really groundbreaking initiative for the Ascot, Sunninghill and Sunningdale neighbourhood plan that's in Berkshire. This was about 10 years ago, and it was one of the very first neighbourhood plans to actually implement a green corridor policy within it. And it was highly participatory, as most neighbourhood plans are. You have to engage with a whole range of stakeholders at community level, businesses, statutory agencies, community members, residents. And we came up with this actually quite groundbreaking and spectacular strategy for protecting some key green corridors in Sunningdale and its environs. Now, the objective of this secondment was actually to see if we could scale up a similar participatory process from a couple of wards all the way to borough level. So a little bit about what is driving this initiative. So here you can see Surrey County Council's principles for GBI, Principle 6, that these have to be planned inclusively and collaboratively. So we have to find opportunities for engaging communities. And Principle 7 is going to have public benefit of all, especially considering the needs of all social groups, i.e. including marginalized groups, marginalized community members, to maximize inclusivity. So these are core principles of many GBI policies. However, I have struggled, actually, to be honest, to see how these are implemented in practice. Usually, GBI policies are implemented in a top-down way, almost imposed on communities. The last thing communities, the first thing communities see is that there's a consultation document published on some council website, and they only have a couple of weeks or a month to make comments, but that is as far as it goes. So we wanted to radically change the approach, and it was perfectly in line with Reclaim's network's objectives, which was to promote multifunctionality and systems thinking, a holistic approach to GBGI, going beyond, the siloed approach that many academics and sometimes officers tackle. One of the big challenges that I have had, both as a councillor and in this secondment, is trying to work with officers that only deal with the climate change strategy, only deal with biodiversity, or only deal with community services. So it really does require joined up thinking across departments. And the second key objective that I wanted to address from the Reclaim Network was to engage with people's needs, so that its design had maximum buy-in and support from the wider community. So, Reclaim Network was fantastic, provided £3,000 of funding for my 20-day secondment. It didn't cover my time, but it did cover for bringing in community experts, hiring facilities, paying for participants, travel expenses. But this is a big task, and so I had to also seek other sources of funding to drive this. So the local government association, in collaboration with UCL in their net zero innovation program, also gave £12,000 for a community-led climate initiative, and my institution gave about 32k for local authority policy change more towards climate resilient agri-food systems related, but it all helps. From the community perspective, the whole engagement process was led by them. I didn't actually have to go into these individual projects. It's just engaging with the relevant materials and then feeding it into the various projects. So the partners were Spelthorne Borough Council, and absolutely crucially, I worked with the Talking Tree Climate Emergency Centre. Effectively, it's a community cafe in Staines High Street that has been made available by Spelthorne Borough Council at almost negligible costs. And it was the hub through which all of our community engagement and workshops and meetings was carried out. It was absolutely crucial to have a community-based entity like Talking Tree supporting this. The Open University also supported this through various projects and facilities and other input, and also had a lot of help from local GBGI biodiversity specialists, local consultants, people that I could use some of the £3,000 funding in to buy a day of their time to just help with the deliberations, with the thinking, with the work. So the outputs were participatory videos showcasing the process of community engagement. I will also, in the process of drafting this co-design guide for policymakers, councils, other interested parties to be inspired from. I would like to do a peer-reviewed publication once I've analysed all the materials, and crucially is to contribute to Spelthorne Borough Council's GBI strategy within its local plan. Big issues there, I'll come to that in a second. So, the engagement process. I used a very transdisciplinary, holistic approach inspired by soft systems methodology. This is approach for tackling in a participatory way complex wicked challenges. Successfully applied all over the world, thousands of case studies from practitioners to academics, and it basically takes an action research, action learning approach with participants. You start off with exploring the context and the issues at play. Then you look at the interests that various stakeholders have in the situation and try to mediate between these various interests. You then get to the next phase where you identify how you can intervene in a situation, and then crucially, you take action, learn lessons, evaluate impact, and then re-explore how the context has changed, and so on and so forth. An ongoing action learning cycle. At the top, you see this flux of events, people, and ideas, recognizing that actually the context changes over time too. So it's not a case of just having one snapshot of the context and then basing all of your deliberations from that one snapshot. It's keeping an eye on the changing situation. Now, really important. One of the big issues with community engagement is that often you have a fantastic time in workshops. People come up with great ideas, great initiatives, but very soon that social memory of the deliberations is lost. So by the time you get down to the next workshop, people have forgotten what has been discussed. There are new participants coming in, some participants drop off. So it was absolutely crucial to use participatory video to record proceedings, not only for us, this will be in the public domain, people can get inspiration, but also to act as a digital social memory for what has happened. So every time we had a workshop, we did a 2-minute, 3-minute screening of the highlights of the previous workshop. So people could come up to speed and would be an memoir for the next step. This was actually led by the digital eco warriors, this youth team. And so this also had a very powerful intergenerational impact in that, it's so difficult to engage youth in these GBGI deliberations, and giving them something exciting, fun to do, like digital storytelling and video making, was a way for them to participate, while you have people of that were slightly older, happy to talk and to discuss in detail. The youth contributed by showcasing their digital skills. So now let me try. I'm going to see if I can share the screen. There you go. You should be able to see that. If not, I'm going to, yes, it should be coming up. Okay, are you able to see it?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so I'm just going to play a little snippet of the very first workshop that we had. Now, this is absolutely crucial. One of the big issues that we have as practitioners when we intervene is we have to be careful to come from the perspective of community members and their interests. So you can't dive straight in asking, well, what do you think about GBI? First of all, community members, especially from marginalized backgrounds, have never heard of the term green and blue infrastructure. So you've got to start from where they are at. And the easiest way to start from where they're at is to get them to explore their challenges. So you'll hear a whole range of things, but that gives us the baseline on which to develop. So here you go.
Glass first before you get to and
we identified flooding as an issue. We identified there are two linked issues really, which is how do you make homes more sustainable, but at the same time also that touches on how you get the cost of living down. So an example that somebody mentioned was insulation, for example. That would deal with both of those, but homes are generally quite poorly insulated.
Okay.
One interesting point was made was that there's quite a lot of people, either individually or in groups, trying to tackle some of the issues that we're talking about today, but they're not connected. So what represented on here is a community network, linkages between people, which could, or groups, which is kind of missing at the moment, and it could be better.
Okay, so that just gives you a quick flavour of the videos that we were taking with communities. Each video is about 5 minutes long. I'm hoping to compile a single 20-minute video that will run through the whole process. Now, the key community priorities that emerged was that they actually wanted to focus on microsites. One of the big issues as a practitioner, a policymaker, an academic is that, we tend to focus on the big sites and big corridors, triple SIs and big green areas. But, communities really felt that they had very little control over those spaces, whereas they had huge control over much smaller sites, grass verges and abandoned corner plots on their estate, school playgrounds, things like that. That came very strongly through in the process. And even more important is that they wanted to see direct and almost immediate benefits to them with regards to the cost of living crisis and mitigating environmental impacts, especially air pollution. So, we often talk about multifunctional GBGI, but these multifunctional properties are very abstract, long-term benefits to communities. They wanted to know, well, what's it going to do for me right now in my community? So one very practical example that came often is, okay, these green spaces that are very much often grass, can we grow food there, right? But at the same time, can we rewild? So, how can we extract direct, tangible benefits for ourselves? The challenges, on the other hand, was I had really major difficulties accessing very basic data from Spelthorne Borough Council, including maps and reports. There's almost a firewall between officers and the community and people like me that want to support communities in deliberations, and that, repeated requests. And they said, well, actually, these maps, very simple maps, just, where are the the green and blue infrastructure, what is council property, things like that. And that was, they could not release that information publicly. So how can you then engage community members in the deliberations without that? So we actually went about doing our own work. So let me see if I can bring that up briefly. It might not be possible. It might be here, right? I don't know if people are familiar with the iTree tool in Canopy. It's a brilliant website where community, anybody, citizen scientists can go in to develop a habitat map of their locality. And if I can just link to the report, let me just show you. And it provides a fantastic report on the percent, after you've randomly identified different points on your locality, what kind of habitat cover they have. It gives you their percentage cover, and it shows, how much carbon is sequestered, what pollutants are mitigated through the GBGI infrastructure, especially the trees, and that is immensely useful. So we are no longer relying on just the council to provide data. We're producing our own data. So going back to the presentation, another big issue is that officers repeatedly stated, Andrea, don't give us more work, right? Don't make more requests for funding and resources. What you need to come up with is cost savings, right? You need to show us how community participation will actually result in using less of our staff time, using less of our resourcing. Can they take over green spaces so that we don't have to maintain it ourselves, right? So that for them was possibly their number one priority. And also another big challenge is that the political cycle was a big hindrance in moving things forward. There was a purdah period during elections in April where basically there was zero decision making at council level. So I was almost left twiddling my thumbs waiting. And then once there was elections done and dusted, I think out of 33 councillors in Spaltham Borough Council, there were 22 new councillors. So all of these new councillors have had to come up to speed. And I think I'm probably running out of time. So just the progress so far, we've had our workshops, we've produced our videos, we've mapped microsites, and we have started our first microsite intervention, transforming this derelict green space handed over by Southwestern Railways to us. Because of this process, they said, well, take it over, do what you want with it. And the next steps is to expand the microsites, produce the guides, engage these new councillors, and apply for major scaling up funding like the Climate Action Fund. Right, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. Very interesting presentation, and I can see that it looks like it's just the beginning of the efforts rather than ending the efforts. And it's great to see the extensive progress you have made over a short period, and that seems to be going in a very the good direction. So we'll be keeping an eye in terms of helping you, but also listening from you, the lesson learned, and the guide would be really interesting one. And I'd like the idea of the microsites and having the kind of the opportunity for the people to own them and to maintain them in the future. I would like to introduce to our second speaker, Gillian Dick. She's the manager of a spatial planning, research and development team within the development plan group at Glasgow City Council. She has a BSc Honours in Town Planning with Hertford University and BSc Honours in Human Geography from the Open University. She's a charter member of the Royal Town Planning Institute and currently the chair of the Partnership and Accreditation Panel. She is the RTPI nominate representative on the Technical University Dublin Partnership Board, where she is the vice chair. She has previously had a similar role with Queen's University Belfast. So Gillian had a lead role for the council with the Horizon 2020 Connecting Nature project, where Glasgow was one of the frontrunner cities. She was also on the European Practitioners Review Panel for the IPCC 6th Climate Change Report Summary for Practitioners. She has been working, in Ben F. Buchanan.
It's Ban from Buchan. I would call it there if you want to hear what I'm saying.
So
you don't need to read the whole lot. It's fine.
Yes. So I think it's a fantastic work she has been doing in this domain, and I think we'll hear from her on the connecting nature and the other work she has been doing around this topic area. So over to you,
Hi, thanks. It's Banff-and-Buchan in the northeast of Scotland. I've done the sublime to the ridiculous of spending half my career in one of the smallest, most remote places in Scotland, and then I went to work in Glasgow. Hi, everybody. I'm Gillian. I'm Spatial Planning Manager. Glasgow does have sun. That's a nice kind of picture there. I'm just going to take you through some of the stuff we've done around a place-based approach using nature-based solutions to create climate-adaptive places. So I just want to kind of give you a wee bit of a reminder. This is an interesting diagram from the IUCN that kind of talks about how you do nature-based solutions. I always talk about, in my laywoman's terms, of every action, policy, strategy, intervention, whether small, big, indifferent, whether it's bricks and mortar bridges or anything, is a nature-based solution, and you look at it through a nature-based solution lens. That means that you should be doing no harm to the social cohesion, community, whether it's human or habitat, doing no harm to the health and well-being of that human population and that habitat species population, doing no harm to the economy, doing no harm to the environment, and doing no harm to the biodiversity all at the same time. So if your action means that you are going to have to mitigate, then stop, think again, and figure out how you can do it so it does no harm, or walk away. What we often do is do things for an economic reason and do dramatic negative harm to the community that has to live with the consequences, and our children have to live with those consequences far longer than somebody like me or a habitat species, or we then do some damage to the environment and then have to come back and do it. So this diagram from the IUCN says it's all about the different challenges we have as a society. It's kind of what Andrea was talking to his communities about. It's about looking at what you can design at scale, understanding the economic feasibility, understanding what the impacts are on the biodiversity, and doing that net gain, i.e. adding to the amount of biodiversity, not subtracting from it, being inclusive, taking people with you, co-producing, collaborating, adapt as you go, and then mainstream it and make it sustainable. You're doing that balanced trade-off. So you can only do that if you've got the geospatial data and you can understand what is going on. And as a council, we're trying to go towards open source data. It's incredibly difficult when you have a lack of human resources to manage that data, collect the raw data, etc., or to collect in all the data that the various communities are gathering as well. Just a reminder, none of this is new. Patrick Geddes 100 years ago talked about live, work, play, the right place for the right people at the right time. Jane Jacobs talked about place in the 60s in New York, saying if you don't love a place, why would you fight for it? And in Scotland, we now have the Place Standard tool, that's placestandard.scot, which allows communities to have a conversation about place in an interactive way. They don't have to talk about nature-based solutions, green, blue infrastructure, green networks, any of those names that are around. They just have to talk about what it feels like to live in that place and what makes that space a place. In Glasgow, we're trying to embed that within our development plan. Development planning process in Scotland has just changed, and we have a new national planning framework. It has 33 national policies in it. 16 of them are all about climate adaptation, nature-based solutions, open space, etc., which is good, going to be applied across the whole of Scotland. But every development plan, whether it's in Scotland or England or anywhere, talks about wanting to have a healthy, high-quality place, a compact community or city that's sustainable, and they all talk about being vibrant, thriving, connected, and green. In Glasgow, we then say that has an overarching placemaking principle, so it covers the whole of the city. And then we have 10 other individual policies that try and pick up some of the big themes, but we also have a spatial strategy where we're saying these are the areas where we're going to make big interventions. We back that up with supplementary planning guidance, some more information. We are trying to make data-driven decision-making, so that's getting back to asking the map. There's been a huge disconnect within, I'm hearing some background of somebody else talking there, but I will keep going. There's been a huge disconnect between the maps and when they got taken out and GIS came in, and that people thought the GIS was a fancy drawing tool. I can still hear somebody talking in my ear. Anyway, I will keep going. So the disconnect between the maps being removed from plan chests and people saying draw this map meant that data wasn't being collected properly, and we're not collecting data on GIS and not using the power of GIS. So we're not collecting the video the lived experience of people, the photos, their sketches, they're what they know and what they don't, and we're not actually using that to power up the citizen science. When we get that data, we can then identify what our asks are of the land, so those parameters. Where do we want growing spaces? Where do we want flood alleviation interventions? And use that data to identify the best place to do that. That would then lead us to feasibility studies, shovel-ready projects that we can then bid for funding for. And the bit where I've said building with nature versus policy and guidance, particularly in England, Gloucester Wildlife Trust did a bit of guidance on how to build with nature. We've now embedded that into policy and guidance so that nobody has to pay for that advice. And we want demonstrators and new methods of delivery. Who are we talking to? Well, we're trying to talk to everybody. We're trying to talk to our local universities in Glasgow. We're trying to talk to Nature Scot, Scottish Environmental Protection Agency. So all those people that have got information. We're trying to take our politicians and our senior management with us, but we also need to capture the communities of interest. Now that can be the communities and where you live, but it can be communities of young people, communities of sports, ethnic diverse communities, gender-specific communities. They all have a different lived experience in that place, and it's valuable information that we need to capture. And my perception as a woman in her 50s of what feels safe in a place is completely different to a teenage boy or somebody from a migrant community's view of what is safe. And we need to capture that. And the eye-level perception of young people is different from the eye-level perception of somebody that's 6 foot tall or somebody that's in a wheelchair. In Glasgow, we're trying to embed some of that within our open space strategy. This is what we used as the example within the Connecting Nature project, where we said we would try and figure out how you could embed nature-based solutions into policy and strategy. So how do you mainstream it across the board? So we weren't looking at site-specific, like our colleagues in Poznan were, who were looking at greening the grey within play areas, or Genk in Belgium, which was looking at a quarter of the city and decultivating and reimagining an old industrial area. So in a Glasgow context, there is a huge debate about the words again. So does the open space strategy encompass the green network or vice versa? And you will see the confusion of people referring to green space when actually what they mean is open space. The biggest open space in Glasgow is the River Clyde and the Kelvin and the Cart and the Lochs. The second biggest open space is the grey spaces, so the footpaths, and then it's the green. If we forget about the blue and the grey, we are missing a huge opportunity, and some of our communities only have access to blue and grey open spaces in which to improve their health and well-being or watch the world go by. It's not to say that we aren't looking at the vertical and the horizontal, the on the roofs and the other things that we can do and where we can put street trees, etc. But we need the right intervention in the right place for the right people at the right time. If you don't do it with the people, they are going to start asking you why the heck you're doing it in the first place. And it could well get accused of being greenwashing. All of this is influenced by a myriad of policies. So the top red shows you the kind of national policies. The blue shows you the close relationships that our open space strategy has. The orange, yellow shows you the planning context, the spatial planning context that it's feeding into. And then there's also a strategic council context. If you layer on top of that, climate emergency, ecological emergency, and the fact we have limited resources and no money, and we can't get at money as a council because we can't get at research council money anymore because it doesn't fund anything that we as a council does. That makes it incredibly difficult, because if the universities are sucking money in and then coming to us for data and information and collaboration, and we don't have any finances to support that, that makes it incredibly difficult. If we look at our open space strategy, the livable, healthy and resilient that I talked about before in our development plan is being pulled through. And you can see the long list of things that we want the spaces between our buildings to do. We need them to be accessible and of a quality. We need a certain quantity of them. We need them to provide a setting and amenity. We need to make sure that the public understands why they're there and support them and want them there and want the activities that are in them. We need to make sure that we're cognizant of the city centre or the town centres and the grey spaces. Our open spaces need to be a place where you play. And in Scotland, we've now got to do a place efficiency assessment, which means we have to ask all the under 18s where they want to play, rest, informal, formal places to sit, places to kick a ball, all of that. We need to embed education and outdoor education in these spaces. Formal outdoor sport needs to go there. Growing spaces, whether allotments or small boxes or apple orchards, needs to go there. They're the places where we walk and cycle. They're the places where we improve the air quality, reduce the noise, reduce the pollution, reduce the heat, do all those kind of things. It's the place that we can slow down water flow and reduce insurance payments by adapting them to deal with the flooding. Underwater football is not a sport at the minute, and therefore the football pitch can flood rather than the houses. We need to use them to enhance our biodiversity, connect our habitats. Any kind of mitigation adaptation we don't know about, getting the heat out the ground, storing heat in the ground, all of those kind of things, and understanding our blue spaces. Now, all of those 15 things, if you've got a great open space, could all happen in the one place at the same time. The community don't necessarily need to know it's doing that, but we also have to be honest about the fact that we have some open spaces, the spaces between the building, that we do not need to retain as open space at the minute, because they're in the wrong place. The community's moved to somewhere else, and we may need to swap them with our vacant and derelict land, which will also get some nature-based solutions on it, but it may well free up land that can be developed in a better way. So we need to think about the retention of our open space, where the new open spaces need to go, redefining our open spaces and which ones are redundant. And remember, by open spaces, I mean green, blue and grey. And it's trying to deal with that in the resource deficiency of councils, where we don't have the people and we don't have funding, and our budgets are shrinking. We've tried to capture all of that information on a dashboard. I will try and put the link, or we'll send the link. It's interactive. It has all kinds of health and wellbeing, social cohesion, economic, environment and biodiversity layers that you can layer onto this. And it also tries to show you some of the data that you can use to ask what you want to deliver. It's centered on our open space map. And you can see some of the crime and alcohol and heart disease data around there, which you can pull out via agent. That's open source, so our communities can see it and can ask us for that data if they want it. As I said, National Planning Framework 4 has come into Scotland. It's talking about sustainable, livable and productive places. I would commend you to go and look at it. The planning process in Scotland and Ireland still values planning in a way that it's maybe not valued in England, which gives us a firmer foundation for what we're trying to do. Within Connected Nature, we came up with a framework. No project ever has a beginning, middle and end. Everybody thinks it has an end. It doesn't. You have a legacy, or you have to keep it going, or you have to stewardship it, or you have to maintain it. You have to think about technical solutions, governance, financing, entrepreneurship, co-production, reflexive monitoring, what went well, what didn't, what could we do better, and that impact assessment. How are you going to measure, and how are you going to continuously measure? I've kind of framed this around our development plan, our place efficiency assessment, and our open space strategy and forest and woodland strategy, and that it's a continuous circle that we are going around, where the evidence feeds each of those processes through. We did develop a really nice tool called co-impact, co-impact.app, open source again. We'll take you through a conversation about how you measure the impacts of any of your interventions and suggest how you measure those impacts for social cohesion, health and wellbeing, environment, economic and biodiversity. It will produce you an impact assessment plan. You don't necessarily need to use it, but that plan will show you how to collect that data, or who might have it, whether it's the council or the academic community. There is also the nature-based enterprise web, where you can find like-minded communities, ask questions, do webinars, a bit like this one, suggest challenges, look for partners, etc. But it has communities of interest that may well give you some support. Just to round off and give you some case studies of the kind of thing we're doing. This is Crossfoot Primary School in Glasgow. This is their playground. It also happens to be part of our flood alleviation scheme. The kids do know that from an educational point of view, but they don't need to know what it's actually doing. The houses around it, though, breathe a sigh of relief because they're not flooding. But that's where we're kind of using it for multifunctionality. This is, or used to be, the bus car park at Celtic Park, Parkhead. You can just see it in the top right photo, right at the edge. You can see the edge of the stadium. The community used to be blighted with gravel, which was empty for 2 weeks. And then every 2 weeks, 100 buses turned up from all over Ireland and Scotland or wherever to watch Celtic. They got air pollution a lot. It's now being reclaimed as a community space for the community, and it's multifunctional and gives them a bit of space, and the buses have been told to go elsewhere and to commute via train. This is land at the back of Moss Heights in Cardonald in the south of the city. It's halfway community park designed for and by the community, multifunctional again, more tree planting, spaces to run, skip, jump, sit, watch the world go by, alleviate the flood alleviation, cool the area down, etc. It has now just been built. This is Alexandra Park, where there's a food forest going in. So as a front runner on our forest and woodland strategy, they've put an orchard in. We're also talking to them around our Every Tree Tells a Story, where we're trying to capture their tree stories, the trees they remember from when they were young, the trees that are important to them. So that's a bit of citizen science to get them talking about what they know, which will then give us the data that we require. They don't need to know that we're talking about something technical. This is Seven Lochs in the northeast corner of the city. It's an area that's post-industrial, has wetlands, lochs, lakes, 7 lakes within it, plus some really old heritage. And again, it's been turned into a big community park that also does flood alleviation and is going to do a whole load of tree planting. And there's various play areas and places for the community to sit, walking trails, etc. This final, I think this is the final one. This is Glasgow Green in Glasgow, the oldest park in the city. And we're looking at carbon sequestration in there. We're also looking at how we can get the heat out of the Clyde. So we're looking at heat pumps, which is just reverse refrigeration, and how much heat we can take out of the river and whether we can store that within the parks. I think that is me. So I am going to stop sharing at that point.
Thank you very much, Gillian. It's a fantastic presentation. There's a lot of work actually, so which is quite inspiring. I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Dr. Calvillo, to take this question and answer session.
Hello. Thank you, Andrea and Gillian, for these wonderful presentations. So there's a question from Matteo Gusti from University of Surrey, and it's a question for Gillian, and asks, can you please give us more details about co-impact? Is it an open source tool that can be used elsewhere? Does it take into consideration synergies among indicators, for example, multidimensionality of effects, or make an economic evaluation of the impact?
So I am multitasking as I speak to you. Hopefully I've put my mic open. I'm going to put the link to co-impact into the chat. I'll make sure it goes to everyone. So yeah, we worked, from a Glasgow perspective, we worked with the University of A Coruña to do the background mapping, so that as you go through, if you just go, oh, it's only economic impacts I'm going to hit, you might select them. It will then do some nudge behavior to say, well, actually, if you want to measure that, you might want to measure these health impacts or these social community impacts. Once you've gone through, and it will suggest alternatives, so we've done all that cause and effect linking, it'll then ask you, do you want to select some impacts about how you talk to people, your governance, etc. I would always recommend that you do that. We haven't been able to take it to the stage where it will then churn the numbers and all the rest of it. We haven't had financial support, whatever, but what we've done is create you the tool that says, it will produce you a PDF that will give you the how, why, where, the academic rigor of each of those impacts and why you should collect them, how you should collect them, from the easy to the simple. So on an air quality one, it will say, well, you can go out with one of those air quality things and spin it over your head and that collects the air quality, or you can get something that actually measures it. I think the spinning over the head is collecting air particles and then you have to go and analyze them. The more technical digital thing will do all that for you, but it tells you the differences in the different ways. So the simplistic is go walk the area, talk to people. The more technical will be something else. But actually what we found is just working your way through co-impact. If you do that with a community, it's a good conversation about what's important. Why are you doing this? What do you want to measure? So if you are asserting that I am putting this intervention in because it will make the area look better, Co-impact might say, well, that might actually improve somebody's health and well-being. So do you not want to measure their health and well-being as well, their mental health and well-being? Or if you say you take the mental health and well-being, it might then tick you towards economic and say, well, that might make those people more employable. So you might want to measure employability. What it's trying to do is get people to think about impact assessment as iterative and not just think about it in the single silo boxes of it's only about economic, which, and I can say this, our UK government thinks that levelling up is all just about the money and the jobs. It's not about the health and well-being or anything else. But actually, you need to measure the cause and effect. It hasn't done a lot of that cause and effect on site. But if you know when you put an intervention in and you are measuring an improvement in health, you can track back to when that improvement changed and go, was it that intervention? Right, I'll go and ask that community, did that intervention make the difference? I don't know whether that answers it or not.
Yes, he has actually said sensational work. Thanks for the link. This is a question by Sander van der Gag from Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh to both speakers. What are your strategies to engaging marginalized groups, and how successful do you feel to have been doing so?
Happy to jump in there. So, you know, one of the things that was absolutely imperative in engaging marginalized group members, including low income groups, refugees, things, groups like that, is actually to pay for their participation. That was absolutely crucial. Often these community engagement workshops, you do an open invitation, and what happens is that, it's usually the environmental activists that turn up. So it's an echo chamber, right? There's always the same people talking to each other, coming up with really amazing ideas, but there is very little wider community buy-in. The problem with marginalized community members is that they're firefighting. There's a cost of living crisis. They've got so many other issues, and it's absolutely impossible for them to give up, 2 or 3 hours of their time every couple of weeks to participate in these events. So we actually paid them, and our participation went through the roof, clearly. It wasn't a huge amount of money. It was £20 per workshop. And, and that allowed people to come back over and over again, because they felt that their time was recognized and, and was valued too. So one key recommendation is pay participants.
I'm going to jump in because as a council, we can't pay the participants. So that kind of screws us up royally to start with. Our issue is there are multiple consultations, i.e. surveys on things saying, tell us this. We also have the local universities, whether it's in a Glasgow context, Glasgow, Strathclyde, Cali, West of Scotland, the Conservatoire, the Art College, all going out and doing community engagement, which leads us to a point where we could be shot in the foot, because if we don't know what who they're talking to, how they're gathering that data, and we can just scrape that data, and we've got the signed documents to allow us to do it, hopefully, we're going to go back to communities who are time stretched, and they'll go, but we've already told somebody what we think about the city. Why are you asking us again? So we need to do that collaboration. We're having a conversation with Glasgow and saying, you need to capture who amongst the Glasgow University is talking to everybody, because you're in danger of shooting yourself in the foot and you're in danger of shooting us in the foot at the same time. And you're using taxpayers' money to do this research, and then we're trying to get to the taxpayers to make their city better. They're telling us they've already talked to people. We're also trying to activate citizen science stuff, and I will put the link to Every Tree, which we've got an Instagram, and it's a project we're running with Strathclyde Uni and Trinity College Dublin, and we did an education pack for children. We're just trying to get people to talk about what they know. So if they are time strapped, drawing a quick picture on a postcard or writing a quick postcard, giving it back to us, we are getting valuable information, and it only takes 5 minutes. So it's not getting them to turn up at a workshop and do something big, but it's starting to get what they think. And in Scotland, we've also been told to do the place efficiency assessment, which is the Scottish Government making a statutory duty for us to talk to the under 18s about the places and spaces they use and how they use them. Now, that's going to be incredibly complicated in somewhere like Glasgow or Edinburgh, where it's nearly 1 million population. So you're looking at 250,000 children, and how you get a diverse slice of them and how you hear their voices. We're currently trying to work with our education improvement, and we're trying to work with a design-based couple of colleagues we've got. But unless it's embedded in the curriculum and the teachers are told to engage with it, it becomes incredibly difficult to get to those places. So there's a whole load of innovation and community engagement going on, but we're all in danger of shooting each other on the foot and not actually capturing all that data. We should be talking to communities once, and then that data should be captured, whether it's videos landing on geospatial, and I should be able to click on Drumchapel in Glasgow and know that Glasgow Uni are going to talk to those people, and here's the videos, or here's the link to the PDF of the research, and know that the school has done some outdoor education stuff, and here's the stuff they've collected. And we should be smarter about using the technology to capture those lived experiences and talk to people once, and then engage with them and show that we've built on what the engagement already is.
I have a quick follow-up question, which is, how do you manage with sometimes even opposing needs? Because, as you said, once you're speaking to many different layers of society, then they might have opposing needs for a certain space. So how does one manage those complexities so that no one feels like 100% frustrated and they feel that actually their voice was heard and something was done about it?
So that's what the planning services across the country are meant to do. We are managing the land asset for the community benefit. That means we've got to do a balancing act. We've got to gather evidence about what are all the different competing demands for this land. How can we identify which demand is going to bring the biggest benefits for the widest amount of community? Now, planning's got lost over the last 20 years, and it was all about building housing. And it's now, the focus has now shifted to climate adaptation and the benefits of the wider environment community. So developers are now being asked to give us their community benefits, to tell us their environmental impact. And as a planner, I've got to weigh up the carbon benefits, the air quality improvements, the open space requirements of a community versus the need for more housing, the need for education spaces and flood alleviation spaces and growing spaces and all of that. If you look at the direction of travel for planning, and I can only speak from a Scottish context, we're now being pushed to do that kind of multiple benefits analysis to identify what would be the best use of that land. But we're in our evidence report that we've got to do, we've to show those competing voices. So we've got to show, we can't just say, we've done this and we've reached this decision. We've got to say there was opposing views. Sometimes that's incredibly difficult, that communities think that what they see as open space, they think is open space, but actually it's just naturally wild development land that's been abandoned. So that land is still zoned for housing or industry or something else. And from a planning perspective, we've got to go through a process because the landowner has a value on that because they've got it valued as housing land and may well be using that as a mortgage asset against development elsewhere. So they don't want to see us rezoning that as tree planting because at the minute they see that as a negative value. So some of the work we need researchers and others to help us do is put the positive value back into the non-bricks and mortar stuff. At the minute, we know from a health perspective that giving open space will improve the health and well-being, will reduce the budget for the NHS, will reduce prescriptions and will save them money. But they don't give us the money to go and plant more trees or create more open space or manage that. They just buy another MRI scanning machine or another nurse. So the economics are all guddled at the minute. And when you look at the calculators like for the levelling up from the UK government, open space, green space is or whatever is seen as zero or a negative because you have to spend money to maintain it. They do not calculate in the benefit of the carbon locking, the air cleaning, the heat reduction, the climate adaptation, the savings for insurance, the savings on mental health and well-being, the savings for none of that world stuff is ever calculated in. Until we change that, we're on a completely uneven footing to the economic world that's going on around it. And that makes it incredibly difficult for planners and politicians to make real good value judgments about what land is best for what. That's what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
If I jump in, or is there, are we running out of time?
I'm afraid we're running out of time. Sorry, Andrea.
Sorry.
I'm gonna give the word now back to Prashant.
Thank you very much, Nerea. I think this was very interesting discussions. I would like to kind of thank to both our speakers and our chair, Nerea, for this excellent session and fantastic presentations. As I said earlier, they are recorded and will be available for you to have a look later on. You could see the link in the chat box for our YouTube channel, where we have the previous webinars as well. I would like to take this opportunity to announce our next webinar, which is that would be our webinar number 14. And the one is from Gillian Owen. He is a resilience officer at Cardiff Council. He also sits on the Reclaim Network Advisory Board. And as you can see, he'll be talking about on a very interesting topic, how the city is taking steps to mitigate against and adapt to climate change. And the next one is from Simon Dole from the Cardiff Council, and you will hear a very interesting work around the coastal defences scheme. So they are very, I know the complementary presentations, and both come from the councils. So that's the webinar on 5th of July. If you are not the member of the network, you can visit the website, which is reclaim-network.org. And on the very front page, you could see the membership form, which is a very simple one. You can fill in, you can get access to the resources, but also can get an opportunity to get those monthly newsletters with an updates and opportunities through the network. We are also on Twitter, if you are there, so you can tag us, you can follow us on reclaim_network, and also on the LinkedIn. If you do a search Reclaim Network Plus, you will find us there. If you have any questions or any queries or any opportunities which you can feel that could be linked to the Reclaim Network, you can simply send it to the info@reclaim-network.org. So with that, I would like to thank everyone, again, our speakers, our chair, and the people, Mark and Charlotte and Cisse working in the background to make this this webinar happen. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a nice afternoon.